The concrete was cold against Adi's cheek. Blood filled her mouth, the metallic taste mixing with tears and rain. Somewhere above her, she heard voices. Laughter. Is she dead? One of the men asked, his boot nudging her broken ribs. Pain exploded through her body. But Adiz didn't scream. She couldn't. Her jaw was shattered. Does it matter? Another voice. Cold. Familiar. The voice that had once whispered, I love you, in the darkness. Throw her in the truck. The river will take care of the rest. Rough hands grabbed her, lifted her like a discarded thing. Through the slits of her swollen eyes, Adiz saw him. Chikademela, the governor's son, the man who had promised her forever. He stood with his back turned. Phone pressed his ear, already moving on to his next appointment. As they carried her away from the third floor of the abandoned construction site, Adiz's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, to the place where their child had been growing, was growing. She didn't know any more. Everything was pain and darkness, and the crushing weight of betrayal. The last thing she remembered before unconsciousness claimed her was the sound of an engine starting, and someone saying, Cross River's 5 hours away. She'll be dead long before we get there. But they were wrong. Death had reached for Adiz Okonkwo that day. But something stronger had pulled her back. Hello, guys. Welcome to my channel. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. What would you have done if this happened to you? Let's dive in. The Lagos sun blazed mercilessly as Adiz Okonkwo stood before the cracked mirror in her family's one-room apartment in Ajigunle. Her hands trembled as she smoothed down the white lace dress, her only good outfit, borrowed from her neighbor. Today was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. Today, Chikademela had promised to take her to meet his family officially. Ada, are you sure about this? Her younger brother Obinna asked, leaning against the doorframe. At 16, he already had the worried eyes of someone who had seen too much suffering. That boy! His father's a governor. People like them don't marry people like us. Adiz turned to face him, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Chike is different. Obi, he loves me. He said so. She thought back to 6 months ago when Chike had walked into the University of Lagos library where she worked part-time to support her education. He was everything she wasn't. Confident, wealthy, dressed in designer clothes that cost more than her family's yearly income. But he had smiled at her, really smiled, and asked about the book she was reading. Chinua Achebe, he had said, picking up her worn copy of Things Fall Apart. A man after my own heart. Or in this case, a woman. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. Secret meetings in expensive restaurants where Chike always paid. Long drives along Bar Beach in his Mercedes. Whispered promises in the darkness of hotel rooms that smelled of expensive cologne and possibility. He had been her first, her only. I'm pregnant, Obi, she whispered, watching her brother's face crumple. Does he know? I told him last week. That's why today is so important. He's going to tell his parents, and then we'll get married properly. Obinna shook his head slowly. Ada, please. Just wait. Something doesn't feel right. But Adiz was already heading out the door, her heart full of hope and her mind full of dreams. She had grown up in poverty, watching her mother die slowly from an illness they couldn't afford to treat. She had fought for every opportunity, every scholarship, every chance to rise above the circumstances of her birth. And now, finally, love had found her. Love in the form of Chikademela, with his easy smile and his promises of forever. The taxi dropped her at the designated spot, a construction site on the outskirts of Lekki, where new developments were sprouting like mushrooms after rain. It seemed strange that Chike had asked her to meet him here instead of his family's mansion in Ikoyi, but had explained that his father wanted to show her the land where they would build their future home. A gesture of acceptance. He had called it. Adiz's phone buzzed. A text from Chike. I'm waiting inside the uncompleted building. Come up to the 3rd floor. She picked her way carefully through the construction debris, her borrowed heels sinking into the red earth. The building loomed above her, skeletal and silent. No workers. No sounds of construction. Just the distant noise of Lagos traffic and the pounding of her own heart. Chike, she called out as she climbed the concrete stairs. Chike, where you? The third floor was empty except for scattered building materials and the view of Legos sprawling endlessly toward the horizon. And there, standing with his back to her, was Chike. But something was wrong. His shoulders were tense, his hands clenched at his sides. Chike? Baby, what's wrong? He turned slowly, and Adiz gasped. This wasn't the man who had whispered sweet nothings in her ear. His face was cold, carved from stone, his eyes empty of the warmth she had fallen in love with. I'm sorry, Ada, he said quietly, but you have to understand. My father, he's going to be president someday. I'm going to follow in his footsteps. There's no room in that future for this. For what? Adiz's voice cracked. For me? For your child. For a mistake. The word hit her like a physical blow. Before she could respond, she heard footsteps behind her, heavy, multiple, menacing. She spun around to see three men emerging from the stairwell, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses. Chike, what's happening? Who are these people? He wouldn't meet her eyes. They're here to make sure you understand. It never happened. You were never pregnant. You never met me. If you try to claim otherwise, if you go to press, to the police, to anyone. He finally looked at her, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. There are many girls who disappear in Lagos every day. No one misses them. You're threatening me? Adiz couldn't believe this was happening. Chike, I love you. You thought wrong. The men moved forward. Adiz tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The first blow came from behind, something hard crashing into her skull. She stumbled, her vision swimming. The second blow caught her in the ribs, driving the air from her lungs. Please, she gasped, reaching toward Chike. Please, the baby. But Chike had already turned away, walking toward the stairs, his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, father. It's done. I'm on my way home. The beating was methodical, professional. These men knew exactly how much damage to inflict. Adiz curled into a ball, trying to protect her stomach, trying to protect the tiny life growing inside her. But it was useless. When they finally stopped, she could barely breathe. Blood pooled beneath her. Every part of her body screamed in agony. Throw her off, one of the men said. Make it look like she jumped. They dragged her to the edge of the third floor. Adiz's fingers scrabbled uselessly against the concrete as they lifted her over the edge. For a moment, she seemed to hang suspended in the Lagos air, seeing the city sprawl below her, the city of her birth, the city of her dreams, the city that was about to become her grave. Then she was falling. She hit the ground with a sickening crack. Darkness rushed in, but not before she heard them laughing. Not before she felt her baby, her precious, innocent baby, die inside her. The last thing Adiz Okonkwo thought before the darkness claimed her completely was, I will survive this. I will survive this. I will survive this. But she had no idea if it was a promise or a prayer. The smell reached her first. Earth and herbs, smoke and something pungent that made her nostrils flare. Then came the pain, radiating through every part of her body like fire in her veins. Adiz tried to open her eyes, but even that small movement sent waves of agony crashing through her skull. Easy, child. Easy now. The voice was old, whether like aged leather, speaking in a dialect that took Adiz's confused mind a moment to place. Efik. She was hearing Efik. Slowly, painfully, Adiz forced her eyes open. She was in a small hut, the walls made of mud and bamboo, the roof thatched with palm fronds. Smoke curled from a small fire in the corner, and hanging from the ceiling were bundles of dried herbs, roots, and things she couldn't identify. Leaning over her was an old woman, her face a map of wrinkles, her eyes surprisingly sharp and clear. Where am I? Adiz's voice came out as a croak. You're in my home, in Akpabio village, Cross River State, the old woman said, dipping a cloth in water and pressing it gently to Adiz's forehead. I am Mama Ngozi. The river brought you to me 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks? Adiz tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. That's when she felt it, the absence, the emptiness in her womb. Her hand flew to her stomach. My baby, no. Mama Ngozi's face softened with ancient sympathy. The child was already gone when I found you. Daughter, I'm sorry, but you should not be alive. Your skull was fractured, your ribs broken. Whoever did this to you, they meant for you to die. The memories came flooding back then. Chike's cold eyes, the men, the beating, the fall. Adiz began to weep, great heaving sobs that reopened wounds both physical and spiritual. She had lost everything. Her child, her love, her future, her life. Why? She gasped between sobs. Why did you save me? It would have been better to die. Mama Ngozi's grip on her hand tightened with surprising strength. The ancestors don't bring someone back from the edge of death without purpose, child. You survive for a reason. Now you must decide, will you lie down and die as they intended, or will you rise up and become what you were meant to be? Over the following months, Adiz learned the story of her survival. Mama Ngozi explained how she had been gathering herbs by the Cross River when she saw something floating in the water, a body broken and bleeding, but somehow still breathing. The old woman had pulled her from the water, recognizing the spark of life that refused to be extinguished. This river is sacred. Mama Ngozi told her one evening as they sat outside the hut, watching the sun set over the water. It has healing properties that even science cannot explain. The river wanted you to live. As Adiz's body healed, Mama Ngozi taught her the ways of traditional medicine, how to identify healing plants, how to prepare remedies for common ailments, how to read the signs that nature provided. But more than that, she taught Adiz something more valuable, how to be strong. You were soft before, Mama Ngozi said one day as they pounded bark for medicine. Soft like clay that hasn't been fired. What happened to you is a fire. Now you must choose. Will you emerge as pottery, hard and useful, or will you crumble into dust? 6 months after arriving at the village, Adiz finally had the strength to ask the question that haunted her. How did I end up in Cross River? I fell in Lagos. That's over 500 kilometers away. Mama Ngozi's expression grew dark. The men who hurt you threw your body in a truck. They drove for hours and dumped you in the Cross River, thinking the waters would carry away their crime. They didn't know this river protects those who are meant to survive. Adiz's hands clenched into fists. I need to go back. I need to tell the police, the authorities, and tell them what? Mama Ngozi interrupted. That the governor's son tried to kill you? Who will believe a poor girl from Ajigunle against the most powerful family in Lagos? You have no proof, no witnesses. They will call you mad, or worse. They will finish what they started. So what am I supposed to do? Hide here forever? No, child. You're supposed to become someone they cannot touch. Someone with power of your own. Then, when you're ready, you can face them, not as a victim, but as a victor. The old woman's words planted a seed in Adiz's mind. Over the next year, she threw herself into learning everything Mama Ngozi could teach her. She also began to experiment, combining traditional remedies with the biochemistry knowledge she had gained at university. The results were remarkable. Mama, look at this, Adiz said excitedly one morning, holding up a jar of cream. I combined your wound-healing paste with aloe and shea butter. It works twice as fast and leaves no scars. Mama Ngozi examined the mixture, then smiled, the first real smile Adiz had seen on her face. You have a gift, daughter. Perhaps the ancestors saved you to bring our ancient knowledge into the modern world. Word began to spread to the surrounding villages about the miraculous remedies being created in Mama Ngozi's hut. People traveled from miles away seeking cures for ailments that modern medicine had failed to treat. And with each success, Adiz's confidence grew. But at night, when the village slept, she would lie awake thinking of Chike, of his betrayal, of the life growing inside her that had been stolen, of her brother Obinna, who must think her dead. The pain never truly left. It simply transformed into something else, determination. 14 years passed. Adiz built a small enterprise, bottling and selling her remedies throughout Cross River State. She saved every naira, invested wisely, and expanded slowly but surely. She took a new name, Zainab Musa, and created a new identity, one without ties to the broken girl from Lagos. Then one evening, as she was closing her now-thriving shop in Calabar, she saw him on the television mounted in the corner. Chikademla, older but still recognizable, standing beside his father at a political rally. Governor Ademla announces his retirement, the newscaster said. His son, Chikademla, will run for governor in the upcoming elections. The younger Ademla promises to continue his father's legacy of progress and development. Adiz stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice and fire simultaneously. Progress. Development. Pretty words to cover ugly deeds. That night, she returned to Mama Ngozi's hut. The old woman was friendlier now, her movements slower, but her eyes were still sharp. You've seen something, Mama Ngozi said. It wasn't a question. He's running for governor. After everything he did, he's being rewarded. And what will you do about it? Adiz met her mentor's gaze. I'm going back. Not for revenge. Revenge is for the weak. I'm going back for justice. Mama Ngozi nodded slowly. Then it's time. You're finally ready. But remember, child, when you walk into the lion's den, you must be the lioness. The private jet touched down at Murtala Muhammad International Airport on a humid Tuesday morning. Adiz, now known throughout West Africa as Dr. Zaina Musa, founder and CEO of Ngozi Naturals, a multi-million-dollar herbal medicine empire, stepped onto the tarmac in a tailored navy pantsuit and designer sunglasses. 15 years had transformed her from a frightened girl into a force of nature. Lagos had changed, yet remained the same. New buildings reached toward the sky, but the same chaotic energy pulsed through its streets. The same traffic, the same hustle, the same desperation, and hope existing side by side. Her assistant, a sharp young woman named Amara, rushed forward with a tablet. Madam, the car is waiting. Your suite at the Eco Hotel is ready, and we have confirmation for tomorrow's press conference. Good. Adiz's voice was calm, controlled. Nothing like the trembling girl who had last stood on Lagos soil. And the other matter? Our private investigator has compiled everything you requested. The files are in your suite. The Mercedes swept through Lagos traffic with practiced ease. Adiz gazed out the window, watching the city roll past. They drove through Victoria Island with its gleaming corporate towers, past the shanties of Makoko, where houses stood on stilts above polluted water, to the organized chaos of markets where anything could be bought or sold. Everything had changed. Nothing had changed. Her hotel suite overlooked the Atlantic Ocean. Adiz stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching waves crash against the shore, remembering another time she had stood before water, broken, dying, being carried by the cross river to her salvation. Madam, the files. Amara placed a thick folder on the glass table. Adiz opened it slowly, her hand steady despite the racing of her heart. Inside were 15 years of carefully compiled evidence. Photographs, bank statements, testimony from witnesses who had been too afraid to speak before, but who now, with her protection and resources, were willing to tell their truths. Governor Ademla's corruption was breathtaking in its scope. Embezzled funds meant for hospitals and schools. Contract awarded to shell companies. Land seized from poor communities and sold to the highest bidder. And most damning of all, a pattern of violence against anyone who dared oppose him. Girls who had disappeared. Journalists who had been silenced. Politicians who had died in convenient accidents. Adiz wasn't the first. She was simply the one who had survived. Among the papers, she found a photograph that made her breath catch. Her brother Obinna, now a grown man of 31, standing outside a small electronics repair shop in Ajigunle. The investigator's notes indicated he had never stopped searching for his sister, never accepted that she was dead despite the police report that had been filed. Amara, I need you to deliver something for me tomorrow. Of course, madam. What and where? Adiz wrote an address on hotel stationery. Her old address in Ajigunle. Take this envelope to this man. Don't tell him who sent it. Just make sure he gets it. That night, Adiz couldn't sleep. She stood on her balcony, watching Lagos's lights sparkle like scattered diamonds, and allowed herself to remember, to feel. For 15 years, she had armored herself in purpose and plans. But now, On the eve of confrontation, the old wounds throbbed. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "I know who you are. We need to talk." A friend. Her hand tightened on the phone. Already, someone had recognized her. But who? And were they friend or foe? The next morning, the press conference was standing room only. Adiz had deliberately chosen the Civic Center in Victoria Island. Prestigious enough to command attention, public enough to ensure safety. Journalists from every major Nigerian media outlet crowded the room, cameras ready. When Adiz walked to the podium, a murmur rippled through the crowd. She was striking, poised, confident, radiating the kind of power that money and success brought. But there was something else, something in her eyes that made people lean forward, sensing a story. "Good morning," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Dr. Zainab Musa, CEO of Ngozi Naturals. Many of you know my company. We brought jobs and economic development to 6 West African countries. But today, I'm not here to talk about business. I'm here to talk about justice." She paused, letting the word hang in the air. 15 years ago, a young woman was brutally attacked and left for dead because she was inconvenient to a powerful family. That woman's only crime was falling in love with the wrong man and carrying his child. The men who tried to kill her thought they had succeeded. They thought they had disposed of her body where it would never be found. The room had gone completely silent. But that woman survived. She was pulled from the Cross River by a traditional healer who saw value in a life that others had discarded. She spent 15 years rebuilding herself, not for revenge, but so that she could stand here today and say, "I am that woman. My real name is Adiz Okonkwo, and I have come home to tell my truth." The room exploded. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Adiz stood calmly at the podium, waiting for the chaos to subside. When it finally did, she continued, "I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Over the next few weeks, I will be releasing documented evidence of corruption, violence, and abuse of power by the Ademola family. Not because I seek revenge, but because the people of Lagos deserve to know who they're being asked to elect as their next governor." A reporter stood up. "Ms. Okonkwo, you're making serious allegations against one of Nigeria's most prominent political families. Do you have proof that Chika Ademola was involved in the attack against you?" "I have something better than proof," Adiz replied. "I have the truth, and I have witnesses who are finally ready to speak. This press conference is just the beginning." As she left the podium, her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. That was brave, or foolish. "Meet me at the Protea Hotel bar at 8 p.m. Come alone. I have information about what they're planning next." Adiz stared at the message, her instincts warring with her curiosity. It could be a trap, but it could also be the ally she needed. At 7:45 that evening, she sat in the Protea Hotel bar, positioned where she could see all entrances. At precisely 8 p.m., a man approached, tall, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. He was in his mid-50s, with graying hair and intelligent eyes. "Ms. Okonkwo," he said, sitting down without invitation. "Or should I say, Dr. Musa? I'm Commissioner Ibrahim Taiwo, Lagos State Police. Retired." "What do you want, Commissioner?" "To help you stay alive," he said bluntly, "and to bring down the most corrupt family in Lagos politics. I've been waiting 15 years for someone brave enough to challenge the Ademolas. Someone who might actually succeed where others have failed. Why should I trust you?" He slid a photograph across the table. It showed him, much younger, standing beside a beautiful woman and 2 small children. "Because they killed my family 10 years ago when I got too close to exposing Governor Ademola's embezzlement scheme. Car accident, they called it, but I know the truth. The alliance with Commissioner Taiwo changed everything." Over the next 2 weeks, Adiz's expose unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Each day brought new revelations, each one more damaging than the last. First came the financial records, showing that Governor Ademola had diverted 2 billion naira meant for public hospitals into offshore accounts. The documents, authenticated by forensic accountants, were impossible to dismiss. Social media exploded. Hashtag Ademola Must Fall began trending. Then came the testimony of Mary Okafor, a former aide to the governor who had kept detailed records of every illegal transaction, every bribe, every threat. She had been hiding in Ghana for 8 years, too terrified to speak. But Adi's resources provided protection, legal representation, and a security detail that made Mary feel safe enough to tell her truth. "I saw him order the beating of journalists," Mary testified in a viral video. "I heard him laugh about it. He called them mosquitoes that needed to be swatted." But it was a third wave of revelations that truly shook Lagos to its core: the disappearances. Using Taiwo's insider knowledge and her own investigative team, Adiz compiled evidence of 17 young women who had vanished over the past 15 years. Women who had been romantically involved with Chika Demola or his associates. Women whose families had been told to stop asking questions or face consequences. The families began to come forward. At a press conference, Adiz stood surrounded by grieving parents holding photographs of their lost daughters. "These are not statistics," she said, her voice breaking for the first time since her return. "These are sisters, daughters, dreams that were stolen. And for what? To protect the political ambitions of men who see women as disposable." The public outcry was deafening. Protests erupted across Lagos. Students marched. Market women organized boycotts. The hashtag Justice for Adiz was joined by hashtag Justice for all of them. But with every revelation, the danger grew. Adiz returned to her hotel suite one evening to find it had been ransacked. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear: "We can reach you anywhere." She immediately moved to a safe house that Taiwo had arranged, a nondescript apartment in a cage protected by former police officers loyal to the commissioner. "They're getting desperate," Taiwo said, reviewing security footage. "That's when they're most dangerous." The next threat came disguised as an opportunity. Chika Demola himself reached out through official channels, requesting a private meeting. "It's obviously a trap," Amara said, pacing the small Say House living room. "You can't seriously be considering this." But Adiz was intrigued. "What's the worst that can happen? He kills me? That would only prove everything I've said." "No, he wants something else. He wants to negotiate." The meeting was set for neutral ground. The Lagos Country Club, public enough to be safe, private enough for honest conversation. Taiwo insisted on wiring Adiz with a recording device. "If he confesses, if he says anything incriminating, we'll have him," the commissioner said, carefully placing the tiny microphone. Chike was waiting at a corner table, looking older than his 38 years. The boyish charm that had once captivated Adiz was gone, replaced by the hard edges of a man who had made too many compromises. "Adiz," he said, standing as she approached. "You look, well, successful." "No thanks to you." She sat down, keeping the table between them. "What do you want, Chike?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Straight to business. I always like that about you. Look, I know what you're trying to do, and I respect it. You've built something impressive. You've got the public's attention. But you have to understand you can't win this fight. I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to tell the truth." "The truth?" He leaned forward. "The truth is complicated, Ada. Yes, what happened to you was unfortunate, but it was 15 years ago. I was young, under my father's thumb. I've changed. Have you?" Adiz's voice was ice. "Because from what I've uncovered, the violence never stopped. The corruption never stopped. You just got better at hiding it." His jaw tightened. "I came here to offer you a deal. Name your price. 10 million naira? 20? 50? Enough to expand your business across all of Africa. All you have to do is issue a statement saying you were mistaken, that it was someone else, and disappear back to wherever you've been hiding. I'm not for sale. Everyone's for sale, Ada. It's just a matter of finding the right price." He pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photograph, then turned it to face her. Adiz's blood turned to ice. It was Obinna, her brother, standing outside his shop, and in the corner of the photo, partially visible, was a man with a gun. "That's not a threat," Chike said quietly. "It's a reality. This ends one of two ways. You take the money and disappear, or people you love start disappearing. Your brother, that old woman in Cross River, who saved your life. Even your assistant, Amara, they're all vulnerable. Ada, and we know where each one of them is. For the first time since her return, Adiz felt fear. Real, paralyzing fear. Because Chaik was right. She had built something, yes, but she had also created pressure points. People she cared about who could be hurt because of her crusade. Why? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why do you need power so badly that you're willing to destroy everyone in your path? Something flickered across Chaik's face. Regret? Shame? But it was gone in an instant. Because it's what I was born to do. Because in Nigeria, you're either the hammer or the nail. My father taught me that. And Ada, you were always going to be a nail. He stood to leave, then paused. You have 48 hours to decide. Take the money and disappear, or watch everyone you love pay the price for your pride. After he left, Adiz sat frozen, her hand shaking. The recording device had captured everything. But what good was evidence if Obinna died? What good was justice if it costed the people she loved? She returned to the safe house where Taiwo was waiting. His face fell when he saw her expression. What happened? He threatened my brother, Mama Ngozi, Amara, everyone. She sank into a chair. Maybe I was wrong to start this. Maybe some fights can't be won. Listen to me, Taiwo said, crouching in front of her. That's what they want you to think. They want you to believe you're alone, powerless. But you're not. We can protect your brother. I have men moving him to a safe location right now. Mama Ngozi is being relocated as we speak. And Amara knows the risks. She chose to stand with you. But what if it's not enough? What if? Then we make sure it is enough. Taiwo's voice was steel. You've come too far to back down now. This isn't just about you anymore, Adiz. It's about every person in Lagos who's been victimized by powerful men who think they're untouchable. It's about my wife and children. It's about those 17 missing girls. You light the spark, we'll fan the flames. That night, Adiz made her choice. She called a press conference the following morning, not to recant, but to double down. I've been threatened, she told the assembled journalists and cameras. Told that people I love will be hurt if I don't back down. And that's exactly why I won't. Because this is how they win. Through fear, through intimidation, through making us believe we're powerless. But we're not. Every threat they make proves that they're the ones who are afraid. Afraid of the truth. Afraid of accountability. Afraid of justice. She played the recording of her conversation with Chaik. His voice, clear and undeniable, admitting to the threats, to the violence, to everything. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the Inspector General of Police, under immense public pressure, announced a formal investigation into the Ademola family. International human rights organizations call for intervention. The U.S. Embassy issued a statement expressing concern about political violence in Nigeria. But Adiz knew this was far from over. Cornered animals were the most dangerous, and the Ademolas had just been backed into a corner. The war had truly begun. The arrest warrant for Chaik Ademola was issued on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, he had disappeared. He's run, Taiwo announced, storming into the safe house. Got word from the airport that a private jet registered to the Ademola family took off 3 hours ago. Flight plan filed for Dubai. Adiz stared at the wall, feeling hollow. After everything, he was going to escape. Can they extradite him? Eventually, maybe, but that could take years. And his father still has enough influence to. Taiwo's phone rang, cutting him off. He answered, listened, and his face transformed from frustration to shock. We'll be right there. What is it? Governor Ademola. He's asked to speak with you. Alone. An hour later, Adiz stood in the visitor's room of the Lagos State Police headquarters. The governor had surrendered himself that morning in a move that stunned everyone. Now he sat across from her, a man who had once seemed larger than life reduced to human proportions. Without his power, his expensive suits, his entourage of bodyguards and sycophants, Governor Ademola looked like what he was, an old man facing the consequences of his choices. Why did you ask to see me? Adiz asked. He was silent for a long moment, studying her face. You look like your mother. You knew my mother? Everyone in Adjugunle knew Patience, Okonkwo. She was the woman who would share her last cup of Gary with a neighbor, the woman who smiled even when she was dying, because she didn't want her children to worry. He shook his head slowly. I grew up in Adjugunle too, you know? Before politics. Before money. I knew what it was like to be hungry, to be powerless. Then why? The question burst from Adiz. Why did you become the thing you must have hated? Because I could. He laughed bitterly. Because when you spend your whole life being stepped on, being told you're nothing, when you finally get power, you become drunk on it. You tell yourself you're different, that you deserve it, that the rules don't apply to you because you've already suffered enough. That's not an excuse for what you did, for what your son did. No, he agreed. It's not, but it's an explanation. I raised Chike to believe that power was everything, that weakness was the only sin. I taught him to see people like you as obstacles to be removed. And now, his voice cracked. Now my son is a fugitive. My legacy is ashes. My wife won't speak to me. And I'm going to die in prison. Good. Adiz said flatly. Yes, good. He leaned forward. But before I do, I want to give you something. The location of the other bodies. The evidence my lawyers have been hiding. The names of every politician, every judge, every police officer who we bought. I want to burn it all down. Adiz studied him, trying to understand. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired. Because maybe if I give you the tools to dismantle everything I built, I can die knowing I did one good thing at the end. He paused. And because my wife begged me to. She said that what we did to you has haunted her for 15 years. That she dreams about the baby we murdered. That she can't live with the blood on her hands anymore. Where's Chike? I don't know. Truly. But I know him. He won't stay hidden forever. He's too proud. Too convinced of his own invincibility. He'll make a mistake. And when he does, you'll be ready. Over the next 3 months, Lagos watched as the Ademla Empire crumbled. Using the governor's testimony and evidence, Taiwo and a newly formed joint task force arrested over 50 people. Politicians, judges, police officers, businessmen. The web of corruption was vast, but each thread led back to the same source. Adiz found herself becoming something she never intended. A symbol. Women's rights groups adopted her story. Anti-corruption activists used her name as a rallying cry. Even internationally, her face appeared on magazine covers. The woman who brought down Nigeria's most powerful family. But fame fell hollow. Justice felt incomplete. Because Chike was still out there, free. Then, for months after his disappearance, Adiz received a call. Ada. The voice was instantly recognizable, even across the years and distance. We need to talk. Chike. Her heart pounded. Where are you? That doesn't matter. What matters is that I want to come home, to face what I did. But I need to know, is there any possibility of forgiveness? Adiz closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 15 years pressed down on her. Meet me at the construction site, where it happened. Tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Ada, Those are my terms. Take them or stay hidden forever. The next day, Adiz stood on the 3rd floor of what was now a completed luxury apartment building. So much had changed. The skeletal structure where she had nearly died was now home to dozens of families. Life had grown where death had been intended. Chike arrived exactly at noon, flanked by no one. He looked terrible, thinner, haunted, aged beyond his years. When he saw her, he stopped several feet away, as if afraid to come closer. I didn't think you'd actually come, Adiz said. I'm tired of running. He gestured to the building around them. Do you remember what I told you that day? That there was no room for you in my future? I remember everything. I was wrong. There was no future without accountability for what I'd done. These past months, hiding in different countries, looking over my shoulder constantly, I realized that you had already won. Not because you destroyed my family, but because you survived. You became something magnificent while I became this. He spread his hands, indicating his disheveled state. A coward? You're right. You are a coward. You killed our child. You tried to kill me. You destroyed lives because it was convenient. I know, and I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm asking you to let me face justice. Real justice. I want to plead guilty. I want to testify. I want to make sure every single person involved goes to prison, and then I want to spend the rest of my life in prison myself. Adiz studied him, this man who had once been her whole world. She waited to feel something, rage, satisfaction, vindication, but all she felt was tired. You want redemption, she said finally. No, redemption isn't possible for what I've done. I just want consequences. I want the world to know that what I did was unforgivable. That privilege doesn't excuse evil. That power doesn't mean you're above the law. And if I say no, if I tell the police you're here, he smiled sadly, then I'll turn myself in any way. I'm not running anymore. Ada, one way or another, I'm done. Adiz pulled out her phone and called Taiwo. Commissioner, I have something for you. The trial of Chike Edemla became the most watched legal proceeding in Nigerian history. Unlike his father, who had tried to fight every charge, Chike pleaded guilty to all counts: attempted murder, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, corruption. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Adiz sat in the front row, flanked by Obinna, who had cried for 3 days when he learned his sister was alive, and Mama Ngozi, who had insisted on making the journey from Cross River despite her age. Does the defendant wish to make a statement before sentencing? The judge asked. Chike stood. Your Honor, I don't deserve to speak. I don't deserve mercy. I don't deserve anything except the harshest punishment you can deliver. But I want to say, for the record and for the cameras, and for history, Adiz Okonkwo is a hero. She survived what I did to her and became a force for good in this world. Meanwhile, I became exactly what my father raised me to be, a monster who confused power with righteousness. He turned to look directly at Adiz. I can't ask for your forgiveness. I can only say that I'm sorry, and that every day of my life in prison will be spent knowing that I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. The judge sentenced him to 30 years without possibility of parole. As the guards led him away, Chike looked back one last time. Adiz met his eyes, and in that moment, she felt something shift. Not forgiveness. She wasn't sure she could ever truly forgive, but perhaps release. The weight she had carried for 15 years began, finally, to lift. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of supporters surrounded Adiz. Women held signs thanking her. Young girls asked for photographs. Journalists shouted questions about what she would do next. But Adiz only had eyes for the two people, standing quietly to the side. Obinna, her baby brother, now a man with his own electronics business, which he had secretly invested in. And Mama Ngozi, the woman who had saved her life and taught her how to rebuild it. What now, daughter? Mama Ngozi asked as they walked through the crowd. Adiz thought about the question. What came after justice? What came after vindication? Now, she said slowly, we build something better. I'm establishing a foundation, the Patience Okonkwo Foundation, named after my mother. It will provide legal aid, medical care, and economic support for women who have been victims of violence. We'll give them what I was given, a second chance. That's good. Mama Ngozi nodded. That's very good. But Ada, don't forget to live. Don't let fighting for justice consume you the way pursuing power consumed the Edemlas. There's more to life than battles. That evening, Adiz stood on the beach at Bar Beach, watching the sun set over the Atlantic. The same ocean that connected to the Cross River that had saved her life. The same city where she had been broken and remade. Her phone buzzed. A message from Amara. Madam, CNN want an interview. Also, there's a young woman here who says she needs help. Her boyfriend, a politician's son, has been threatening her. What should I tell her? Adiz smiled. There would always be another fight, another woman who needed help, another injustice to confront. But Mama Ngozi was right. There was also life to be lived. She typed a response. Tell her I'll see her tomorrow, and tell CNN yes, but only if they donate the appearance fee. to the foundation. Then she turned off her phone and stood in the fading light, feeling the cool ocean breeze on her face. 15 years ago, she had been left for dead. Today, she was more alive than ever. Not because she had destroyed the Ademulas, not because she had gotten revenge, but because she had survived. She had risen. She had transformed her pain into purpose. And that, she realized, was the truest victory of all. The governor's son had left her for dead, but she had returned, not as a victim, but as a victor. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not to destroy, but to rebuild. And in doing so, she had become unstoppable.